Hello, YouTube. It's me again with some more words of wisdom. Yes, I consider my words wisdom. But even though I'm not the smartest guy in the world, you don't have to be an Albert Einstein to be full of wisdom. Just like you don't have to be a rocket scientist to be an artist. Okay, that made no sense, but oh well. Okay. As a lot of you know, I'm unemployed. And I stay home a lot. I take an assortment of medications, and I'm in the hole because, I have accrued a lot of debt over the years. All throughout my 20s, I've accumulated so much debt that it's practically impossible to pay off now, I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm just blaming myself because nobody forced me to take the money. It was my own greed and my own selfishness that, kind of made me say yes to every credit card offer I got, every student loan I got, every payday loan I got, which, payday loans is only 2. Yeah, 2. Ironically, those are the only 2 payday loans I have that's hanging over my head. And I had no problem paying it back, I had absolutely no problems paying it back. But one of the payday loan companies was like, all right, every time you make a payment, if it's not the entire amount of money that you owe us, you have to pay an additional $150 to an extra $50 on top of what you owe. So let's say all I could afford to pay was $50 that 1 month. Well, on top of that, I had to pay $150, which made it $200. Next month, let's say I could afford to pay $100, which I did the next month. Then they only put down $100, and so forth. Well, got to the point where I needed another extension, but they wouldn't give it to me. So what did I do? I looked on YouTube and I got some advice, and people said, close down your account, just close it down, and then make a new arrangement with them. Well, didn't really turn out so well, and it's not a decision. It's not a decision that I'm very proud of, As a matter of fact, that mistake has caused me a lot of headaches. I can't really answer the phone right now, because, oh wait, it's an 801 number. I must know this person. Oh wait. You have been named in a person of interest. Blah, 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 your typical payday loan debt collectors company. They use fake they hide behind, altered phone numbers to catch you when you least expect it. And I've tried and tried and tried to make a good arrangement, but to no avail. So now, it's like, if I do end up in court, so be it. It's a mistake I made. It's a mistake that it's going to haunt me because, let's say I do get married, okay? Let's say I get married and we have a kid. let's say me and my wife, hopefully I have a wife, me and my wife want to buy a house. Well, one of the first things mortgage companies look at is your credit, and if your credit's not good, they're probably going to say no. And let's say let's say my future wife doesn't really care that we can't get a house, but let's see. Look at my Green Lantern shirt. Look at my Green Lantern shirt. Sorry, I love that shirt. I love my Green Lantern shirts. Let's say she doesn't mind, renting, an apartment or renting a house instead of owning a house, or renting a basement, which would be fine if it was just two of us, but let's say she gets pregnant and we have a kid. Yeah, probably wouldn't be good because kids need, to run around and let energy out, and if you live in a very small and cramped place, the kid is gonna want to go out more and more and more to play, and depending on the area you're living in, if you can't afford a good place, and you're living in a bad part of town, more than likely you're not going to want to let your kid go outside. And, that's not good. Now, I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm taking full responsibility for, my mistakes I made. A few days, actually, I'm only 7 days away from turning 30. My 30th birthday is on July 10th. And back then, when you make money mistakes, a couple years ago, sometimes you don't really think of the consequences that's going to happen later in life. But, when you realize the mistakes you've made, what can you do, All you can really do is try to work things out with the people you've wronged. And if they're not willing to work with you, well, I guess, they can keep calling, and then you'll answer and then try to work something out again, and it just becomes a pattern, and then bam, new debt collection agency is calling you instead of the other one. And then suddenly you find yourself being threatened with being served, and that's not good. And at least, if you get taken to court, you can make a payment arrangement, with the courts. However, make sure you keep on top of it, because if you're late with one payment, you can get brought back to court. But research it before you do anything. Let's see, some more words of encouragement and wisdom, I guess. If you made a mistake in the past, don't blame anybody else, okay? Even if it's not 100% your fault. Don't blame anybody else. Let's say you hit somebody, and I did that a lot, when I was like 13, 14, 15. 16 I started, tapering off because I realized I was a coward and it was wrong. You hit somebody, and you want to try to apologize to the person about it. Don't be surprised that the person doesn't want to talk to you, because you've wronged them and people need time to heal, Time does heal all wounds if you let it. Unless, you're like me, who kind of suffers with hate and, anger. I do have anger, I'm not a violent man, but I do get angry, and, anger's not good. Unless it's righteous anger, but if you're just angry at something that happened in the past, then, you can't really let it go, it's your fault, and just learn to forgive yourself, and then, pray that the person you've wronged, has recovered, and pray that they forgive you, and maybe one day you can apologize to the person. But it's not a big deal. If it's not totally a big deal, then let it go, man and woman. Let it go. The worst thing you could do is go to bed angry. And, I've done that before too. And I realize when I've gone to bed angry, I can't really go to bed. All I can do is lay there and, clench my fist. And, just don't let life, kick you in the behind. If you made a mistake, own up to it and be like, yeah, I did that, regardless of the consequences, if the courts decide to seize your assets, that's on you. If the courts decide to freeze your accounts, well, consequences, in life, and there's consequences to everything you do, whether they be good or bad. Let's say an example of good consequences. Let's say you gave some money to a church. If you're paying tithing to a church, good consequences are that money will go to something good. Maybe the welfare program, or maybe depending on what church you're a part of. Some churches use your tithing for college funds. Some use it for welfare programs like food pantry and clothing, and rental assistance. And there's good consequence. That's a good consequence. Bad consequences are like, let's say you stole something. Okay, you stole something and then you get caught. Let's say you were shoplifting and you got caught, stealing. The consequences are not good, unless you get let off with a warning. But if you get let off with a warning, you'll probably not be going back to that store because you've been banned. And that's not a good consequence if that store is really close to you. Or you'll get arrested. And you really don't want to have a criminal record right now, With the way the economy is here in America, finding a job is really hard, and employers right now are really picky. Ew, disgusting. Are really picky. And so if they see that you have a criminal record, they'll probably take your application and toss it. So, ba-boom. So, make sure, you consider what you're about to do. You consider the consequences, And remember, God is always watching. God is always watching. He knows everything. And I'm probably going to get some rude comments down there. But hey, I have faith in God. I love God. And, if, let's say if an atheist sees this video and starts, calling me a delusional person, yada yada yada, an idiot, which I've read atheists call Christians and other people of faith that name, and other more expletive words. So be it. That's life. So. And I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I haven't considered the good or the bad. I have started doing that now, but back then, all throughout my 20s and teens, I never thought about it, I was always, live for the moment right now. And deal with any problems that come from it later on. And, later on comes quicker than you think. So just think about the consequences of anything you do. Alright, I guess I've ran my mouth off long enough and making faces at the camera. I look like crap. Let's take one more look at my Green Lantern shirt. Whoa! Okay, well, thanks for watching, folks. Goodbye.